Today, we're diving into something that's part art, part science, qualitative data analysis. We're talking about how to find the real meaning, the stories, hidden inside things that aren't just numbers. Like interviews, field notes, or videos. So you've done all the hard work, right? You've got hours of interview recordings, stacks of documents, but now what? It can feel totally overwhelming, like this giant tangled knot of information. How in the world do you turn all of that into a story that makes sense? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today. Here's our game plan. We'll start by figuring out what qualitative analysis really is. Then we'll take a quick tour of the different methods out there. And after that, we'll walk through two really solid step-by-step blueprints that show you how to get from raw data to some powerful insights. All right, let's get into it. So what is qualitative analysis at its core? Well, it is so much more than just reading. It's an active process. You're not just passively scanning text, you are on a hunt for meaning. This quote from Lloyd just nails it, doesn't it? It shows that this whole thing is a blend of two crucial skills, being systematic and being creative. Your job as the researcher is to find all these little threads in the data and then weave them together into a narrative that actually means something. And here's a super important point. Analysis is definitely not a straight line. It's more like a dance. You're constantly moving back and forth between the raw data itself, the little labels or codes that you create, and the bigger analysis you're building. It's a really dynamic and flexible process. Okay, so how do you actually do all this? Well, there isn't just one right way. A great way to think about it is like you're a data detective, and every good detective has a toolkit with different tools for different kinds of mysteries. And here are just a few of those tools. You've got things like narrative analysis for when you're focused on stories, or phenomenological analysis for when you want to understand someone's lived experience. The list is long, but for right now, let's zoom in on a few of these key methods to see how they work. Okay, these two can sound really similar, so let's clear it up. Think of conversation analysis like using a microscope. You're looking at the tiniest details of how people talk, the pauses, the way they take turns, to see how we create social order. Discourse analysis, on the other hand, is like using a wide-angle lens. It looks at the bigger picture of how language shapes our entire social world. But what happens when your data isn't text, but a video? Well, that's where video analysis comes in. You can approach it in two main ways. You can use a standardized method where you have a checklist of things you're looking for, or you can take a more interpretive approach where you're really focused on what the actions meant to the actual people in the video. Then there's content analysis. This one is all about being systematic. You're essentially taking all your verbal or behavioral data and sorting it into categories or buckets. The goal here is to classify and summarize everything so you can see the patterns more clearly and start to figure out what's really going on. So, we've seen some of the tools in the toolkit, but a pile of tools doesn't build a house, right? You need a blueprint. So what's the plan for moving from that mountain of data to a truly clear insight? This is really the key. No matter which method you choose, the underlying goal is always the same. It's a journey of reduction. You're systematically sifting, sorting, and simplifying all that complexity to uncover the essential patterns and create some new, meaningful knowledge. To make this more concrete, let's check out a specific blueprint. This first one, from Erlingsson and Brysiewicz, is all about deep, reflective engagement with your data. So it all starts with just familiarizing yourself with the data. You read it over and over and over again. This is called a hermeneutic spiral, where you move between the small details and the big picture to deepen your understanding. Next, you break the text into smaller, meaningful chunks and condense them. From there, you give each of those condensed chunks a short label or a code. And finally, you start grouping similar codes together to build your categories, which then form your big, overarching themes. Okay, let's look at another powerful blueprint. This one from Nigatu is a little more structured. It's what you might call a framework-driven approach. You'd probably choose this when you aren't starting from scratch, but you have a theory or some specific questions you want to apply to your data. This process kicks off with just getting organized, transcribing, cleaning, and structuring your data. Then, and this is the crucial part, you identify a framework or a coding plan before you dive in too deep. Once you have that plan, you start sorting the data by applying your codes. And finally, you use that framework to describe the patterns and themes you've uncovered. It's a really clear path from data to insight. When you put these two models side by side, you can see something really important.
They have different philosophies, for sure. Erlingsson and Brysiewicz' model lets themes kind of emerge naturally from the data. Nigatu's model is more about applying a pre-existing structure to the data. But look at that first step. They both start with the absolute necessity of getting familiar with the material. That initial immersion is non-negotiable no matter which way you go. So really, the main takeaway is this. Qualitative analysis is a journey of transformation. You take something that's huge, unstructured, maybe even a little messy, and through a process that's both systematic and creative, you turn it into a story that is clear, insightful, and powerful. So the next time you're faced with pages of transcripts or hours of video, try not to see it as a problem. See it as pure potential. Because the real question is, what hidden stories are just waiting inside your data, ready for you to find them and bring them to light?